Hi and welcome to Sims Racing. Ever since I started designing liveries for Dirt Rally 2.0, people have asked me for advice or a tutorial on how to do it. And each time I've provided those people with tips and tricks, but putting together a tutorial, well, that has always been complicated. To my surprise, there isn't really a step-by-step tutorial available yet. Until today, that is. The channel offers me the ideal tool for such a tutorial, as I can explain everything in words and show you footage of me actually doing it all at the same time. This tutorial video has been in the works for quite some time. I started writing the script for it many months ago but struggled to finish it. I'm not easily satisfied and a tutorial video like this has to be on point. Over time I've rewritten sections, left things out, added other bits and even started over once or twice. But eventually I managed to put it all together. Now keep in mind that this is going to be quite technical, however I'll try to explain it as clearly as possible. It might be a bit daunting at first, but once you get the hang of it somewhat, it's really not that difficult. So get yourself strapped in and let's start designing liveries for Dirt Rally 2.0. Right, before we get into this properly, I'd like to take this moment to thank two people who have, and still are, playing a vital role in regards to Dirt Rally 2.0 livery design. First of all we have Rally Gamer. This genius of a man provides us with all the necessary tools and information surrounding the files we will be working with. You can find a link to it in the description down below. So thanks for your years of dedication to the Dirt and Dirt Rally community, because you, my friend, are truly one of the unsung heroes. Secondly, we have the Flying Tuga. The reason as to why this man is a community legend is very simple. He's the creator behind all the templates we as designers need. Without his wireframes, it would be extremely difficult to put anything together. Oh, and one final thing before we begin, make sure that you create and organize a folder on your computer or external hard drive with everything regarding livery design. By having an organizing system in place, I know exactly where I can find everything, which makes it so much easier to work efficiently. Something to keep in mind. Now let's get into the tutorial itself. I'll start by giving you an overview of the video structure. First off, I'll show you which files Dirt Rally 2.0 uses, as well as each of the programs and tools you'll need, explain what their purpose is, where you can find them and how to use them. Secondly, I'll go over which specific files we will be using to design our livery and give you all the necessary information on how to work in them, as well as how to save them properly. After that, I'll explain how to get your custom design ready for installation, as well as how to actually install it into the game. And last but not least, I'll provide you with another handy tool, as well as tips and tricks on how you can speed up the design process. For this tutorial, I'll be working with an example folder which is similarly organized as my main design folder. It contains everything we need to create a design for one specific car. Keep in mind that the same methods apply to all the other cars from the base game. DLC cars are excluded here as they are heavily encrypted, and up till today we are not able to create designs for them without risking to damage the game's integrity. So it is important to remember that this tutorial only applies to cars which are part of the base game and not the DLC cars. Now before we can actually start putting our custom design together, we need to know which files we need and where we can find them. When you install Dirt Rally 2.0, you had to select a location on your computer. That location is what we call the game's directory folder. Like many of you, I bought and installed the game via Steam. The Dirt Rally 2.0 directory folder in this case can be found in the main Steam folder. So you open your hard drive and go to Steam, Steam Apps, Common, Dirt Rally 2.0. I'm not exactly sure how it works when you're not using Steam, but I suspect it's just on your hard drive in a folder called Dirt Rally 2.0. The next logical step after we open the Dirt Rally 2.0 folder is to open the cars folder, right here. Inside we will find a whole range of nefs files, each having a name consisting of a combination of 3 letters / numbers. Logically, each of these nefs files is linked to one of the cars in the game. The question then is, which is which? Well, for that we need to visit Rally Gamer's website for the first time. He put together a list showing which car each of those names represents. The car I'll be using as an example in this tutorial is the Skoda Fabia R5 Evo, and if you search the list, you'll find that the file we need for the Fabia R5 is called SR5. Unfortunately, when you double click on the file, you won't be able to open it. Luckily for us, Rally Gamer provides us with the first useful tool called Nef's Edit Tool. You can download this tool from his website as well. So how do you actually use it to open the Nefs files? You go to File, Open and search for the cars folder with all those Nefs. If you then select the SR5 Nefs and click on Open, you'll see this. There's a lot in there, but we only need Livery User. This contains a blank version of the car which is perfect for us. When you select that one, you can see textures high and textures low. Open the textures high and select the 5 files I've just highlighted. Right click on them, pick Extract to and choose the location you want them to be extracted to. I always extract them to my desktop for easy access. Before we move on, also pay attention to the other tabs which are similar to Livery User. In this case we have Livery_00. Remember that name because we'll need it in just a second. Now open the extracted folder Cars on the desktop and keep going until you come across these 5 PSSG files. Copy those to original files in your work folder. The original files folder mainly functions as a backup in case something goes wrong and we need those original files again. If you return one tab in the work folder, you'll see a folder called Adjusted Design, which contains all the files we will adjust with our custom design. In other words, these are all the files we'll eventually use to install our custom livery. So our next step is to open that one and create a folder sequence as follows: SR5, Livery_00, and textures_high. In the textures_high folder we will copy paste those same 5 PSSG files from before once again. At the moment the PSGs all end with the word user. What we need to do is replace user with 00 in each of them. We have to do this because it needs to match up with the name of the livery folder, which is livery_00. At this point we have collected and organized all the necessary game files we'll need to install our custom livery again in the end. However, the files we will be designing in are still inside those PSSGs. To get to them, we need another of Rally Gamer's tools called Ego PSSG Editor, which you can also download from his website. What this tool does is grant us access to the files inside the PSSGs and makes it possible to export and import design files we are working with. So open the tool, press Ctrl O and start searching in our original files folder for our PSSGs. Before we open any of them, let me quickly explain what we can find in each of them. SR5 Texture High 00 contains all the files for the body of the car. The other 4 are all in regards to wheels and tires. GR is for gravel, SN for snow, TM for tarmac and WT for wet tarmac. The most important one for us is of course SR5 Texture High 00. So let's open this one first. On the left we can see a whole list of files again. Now we won't be needing all of them, just the 4 I'm highlighting. You might be wondering what each of them are, but I'll explain that once we start the actual design process. So what you need to do is select each of them, go to textures and select export. Export them to the original files folder where we have our backup PSSG files. We won't be designing in all of them, but it's important to have them as a backup just in case. If you want to adjust the color of the wheels, you can also use the Ego PSSG editor to extract those design files. I'll open the gravel one as an example. You can see we have 4 files on the left. The only one we will have to export is the first one, SR5 Wheel D TGA. So export it and rename it to gravel. You can follow the same steps for the snow and tarmac wheels. Only export the first file and rename it to snow, tarmac or wet tarmac depending on which it is. The reason we need to change them is because they all have the same name and would replace one another if we exported them without renaming each. After that's done, we only have to do one more thing before we can actually start designing in Photoshop or GIMP, which is download the wireframe templates to work in. Each of these was created by the Flying Tuga, who I mentioned in the introduction. If you follow the link in the description down below, you will find all of his templates. I downloaded the Fabia template earlier and put it somewhere in my work folder for easy access. Now that we've done all this, let's get into the next chapter, designing your livery. And just to be clear, this is a how to design liveries for DiRT Rally 2.0 tutorial and not a Photoshop tutorial, so keep that in mind. To start off, we need to open the car's body template in Photoshop or GIMP, which is aptly named Fabia R5 body template. Once you've opened it, the first thing you'll need to do is save it somewhere else. The reason for it is to keep the original template as is and have a different file where we can work in. So go to File, Save As and locate your work folder. I use a separate folder for all the files I adjust for my own designs. Then give it a name and save it as a PSD. This extension will keep all the different layers we work with separate. And for the love of all that is holy, please save your progress regularly, because you really don't want to lose any of your hard work. I myself basically save it each time I make an adjustment. So if we look at the template in our design program, you can see that we have 3 layers: wire, misc and layer 0. The first one really speaks for itself. It's the wireframe that shows all the different body panels. Misc, our second layer, mostly contains internal mechanical elements like the engine, everything on the underside of the car, lining of the wheel arches, etc. However, the most notable bits for us are the rear wing, wing mirrors and roof scope. Now, important to know is that we never adjust any of these layers, because once there is an adjustment made, mostly by accident, it's difficult to reverse. The final layer is just the background color of the car. Adjust the color of that layer to the base color you want to use. For the design I'm using in this tutorial, it's going to be white. Pro tip, if you use pure white as a base color and install it into the game, it will be extremely bright. So to rectify this, I suggest you don't use pure white but something which is slightly more greyish. The greyish white I use has the color code E1DDE1. Now, when designing, almost all your work will be done in between the layer 0 and misc layer. Before we continue with designing, I would suggest locking those 3 layers so we can't move them by accident. If you do move the misc layer, for example, without knowing, it might cause you some headaches in the end. I once did that, installed the car when I was done and found that everything was slightly off center. I spent hours trying to find out what went wrong and I couldn't figure it out. So in the end I decided to start from scratch. And it was only after several more hours that I realized what happened. So let me spare you the pain by telling you to lock it down, just to be safe. Knowing all of this, you can call upon your wild imagination and create a design in whichever way you want. The most important advice I can give you whilst designing is to work as organized as possible. In my case, I create groups and subgroups to work in. As you can see, I have one group called Design. Within it, I have different subgroups for each of the major sides of the car, such as the front bumper or the bonnet. Each of those subgroups then contains the different color layers. In this case, yellow, green and grey. Usually when designing, you already have an idea of where you want to go with your design. So the order depends on which color would lay on top of the other in your mind. This makes it a lot easier to adjust the design pattern as you go along. And it's also easier to find things. Something else you might notice is that all the groups and layers I'm not working on are locked. Again, that's just to make sure that I don't move any of the layers by accident, something which inevitably will happen at some point. As you can see, if I try to move this one, for example, I get an error message. Safety first, right? Another group I use is called Sponsors. This one works very similarly to the Design group, where I have the different subgroups for each major side of the car. And again, organizing it like this makes it easier to find and correct sponsors when adjustments are needed. Important to know is that I give each sponsor logo its own layer, because sometimes you need to move one around or rescale it and you don't want the rest of the logos to be affected by this. The next group is called Rally Plates plus Scrutineering. I think it's quite obvious what's inside this one. The final group you can see is called Overlay. This is where we have all the bits and pieces we can't put in between misc and layer 0. Here we find sponsor logos on the rear wing, roof scope, wing mirrors, as well as the number plates, for example. Now, I did skip one layer called Corner Check. If I zoom in on the top left corner, you can see that I put a small blob of color there, and I did the same thing in the bottom right corner. I won't explain exactly why right now, but it will become clear in just a bit. Once you completely finished your design, you'll need to save it in 2 different formats, as well as export certain groups as a PNG. In just a second I'll get into the reason why. So first off, save it one last time as a PSD. Saving it again this way is to make sure we have the latest version ready to be adjusted in case that's necessary. Once you have done that, make all the groups and layers visible except for Wire and Corner Check. Then go to File, Save As, and save the file with the extension DDS. DDS is the extension which the game will recognize. Trying to install the livery using a different extension will result in DiRT Rally 2.0 crashing. After you clicked on save, another window will appear. The texture type you need to select for this specific file should be color. The compression you need to select is BC1, 4BPP, sRGB, DX10+. And also make sure you pick Auto Generate for mipmaps. In case you are using GIMP, you need to go to File and click on Export As. In the name bar, you'll have to change the extension to .dds. The compression type you need to select here is PC2DXT3, and don't forget to select generate bitmaps as well. Now after we have finished the design on the body of the car, we'll work in another file called SR5 main.s.tga, which is the specular map of the car. The purpose of this file is to adjust the way our design reflects light. In other words, with this file we can make parts of our design look like they are made from a different kind of material. However, instead of explaining the whole thing, I think it's easier to just show you. Using the original file, the car would look like this. But after working in it, I can change something that looks to have a metallic shine and make it appear as if it's matte or chrome. An important side note here is that you can't open the spec map file in GIMP. I'm not exactly sure why, but I always get an error message saying that the file has an unsupported format. Having said all that, let's get back to saving your design and exporting certain groups. So in order to speed up the process of working in the spec file, our next step is to export several groups as a PNG. The first one being sponsors. So what you do is make all the groups and layers invisible except for sponsors and our corner check layer. The importance of the corner check layer is to make sure that once we copy paste the PNG onto our spec map, all the logos are in the exact spot they should be. In case you want to adjust the material as it were of certain decals on your design, make the design group and corner check layer visible and all the others invisible. Then export those as a PNG as well. If you do that, you will also have to export the MISC and corner check layers as a separate PNG too. So once that is done, you can fully close this particular project. Now let's move on and get into more detail on how to work in this spec map file. What I've done is copy pasted SR5 main.s.tga from the original files folder into the folder with the adjusted design files. As I said before, the original files folder is mainly a backup in case I need it, and the folder with the adjusted design files contains everything I used to create my livery. The files we need to open in Photoshop are the following: SR5 main.s.tga, design.png, misc.png and sponsors.png. Once they are open, copy each of the PNGs on top of the spec map in different layers, with the spec map at the bottom, then design, misc and sponsors in that order. Depending on the type of decal material you are aiming to achieve, you'll have to use different colors. Luckily for us, there is a bit of a cheat sheet for this. The red color at the top gets you that metallic shine, which normally is already there, so we don't really have to use it. The darker red is used for text and logos and reduces that metallic shine so they look more like logos on a real car. The greenish brown color is used to make things appear matte. Blue, purple or pink are used to make chrome decals. Each color will result in a different level of chrome. To give you a few examples, there's the chrome gold on this Polo R5, then you have the iconic Mica blue on the Impreza, and finally the chrome green on the Fabia R5 I've been using in this tutorial. And just as a reminder, the same thing applies as usual. Make sure you save it as PSD first before you continue, so that you can make easy adjustments later on and don't have to start from scratch every time. So with that in mind, use the pipette to select the dark red for text and sponsors and copy the color code of it. Then double click on the sponsor layer, go to color overlay, click on the color rectangle and paste the color code we just copied. This will instantly change the color of all the logos to the dark red we need. Nice and easy. When it comes to the sections of the design pattern, it's a bit more tricky. Say for example you want to make the green more chrome-like. Well, use the pipette to select the greenish brown color you need and copy its color code. The next thing you need to do is add a new transparent layer above the design layer. Then go to select and color range. Move your cursor to a spot where the color you want to change is and left click, followed by clicking OK. This will select all the green areas of my design. All you need to do now is select the transparent layer, make sure you are using the correct color and paint the selected areas. And finally, in order to make sure none of your design pattern decals cover the MISC layer, you have to select the latter, press Ctrl A, then the downward key followed by the upward key. Pressing the downward key moves the selection down a click, so pressing the upward key is to make sure that the layer is back in its correct position. Simply select the design layer next and press the delete button. This will remove any of your decals which would cover the misc layer and prevent certain parts of that layer to look like chrome once you install your livery into the game. After you finish that, make sure the design and misc layer are invisible and save it one last time as PSD. To be able to install the car correctly, we also need to save it as a DDS. So go to File, Save As, select DDS and press Save. The important thing when the window pops up is to select a different kind of compression. For the body specular map it is BC7, 8BPP, Fine, Linear, DX11+. Once it has been saved, you can fully close the project. With the body of the car completely finished, let's move on to the windows. Go to your original files folder, copy the SR5 glass D.tga as well as the SR5 glass S.tga file and paste it into the adjusted design folder. Then open those two files you just copy pasted in Photoshop as well as the window template from the Flying Tuga. Quick side note again, GIMP users won't be able to open the specular map for the windows as was the case for the body spec map. As you might have noticed, the Windows template file has some sort of dark green background which might create some issues with the transparency, but there is an easy fix for it. First things first, save the template file as a PSD in your adjusted design folder. Then just copy the other files we opened beneath the wire layer of the template. In this particular case, their size differs, so we'll have to scale it up. Go to Image, Image Size and see what the exact size is, which is 2048 by 1024. Go to the tabs with the other files we want to scale up and adjust them accordingly. After I've done that, copy the layers again and put them underneath the wire layer. You can see that they fit perfectly. Now we no longer need layer 0, so you can either make it invisible or just remove it completely. Our next step is to start with the normal window design, so you can make the spec map layer invisible as well, just for now. If that's done, you can start putting your decals in the right places, working in an organized fashion just like we did earlier, using groups and subgroups. Afterwards, all you need to do is save it one last time as a PSD and then as a DDS too. Once again, you will have to use a different type of compression as well as texture type. Texture type is color plus alpha. Alpha is needed for the window's transparency. The compression is BC3, 8BPP, sRGB, DX10+. For the GIMP users among you, the compression type is BC3, DXT5. And don't forget to select Auto Generate Bitmaps. GIMP users can now fully close their project. Those working in Photoshop like me, however, aren't done yet because we still have to finish the Windows spec map. First of all, just as a security measure, save the project as a PSD once more. Now the quickest and easiest way to finish the spec map is by selecting all the decals you added in the group Windows, duplicate them and merge those duplicated layers together. Afterwards, all you need to do is just drag that layer to the spec map group. Unlike the body spec map, we won't have to use different colors. The only one I use is a yellowish brown with the color code 634500. So double click on the layer we just dragged down, go to color overlay, change the color using the color code I just mentioned and press OK. Right, that should be fine as is, but I myself do always adjust the banner on the front window completely. Just use the polygonal lasso tool to make the selection and color it in. When that's done, save the file one last time as PSD and then again as DDS. The texture type is color. The compression is BC1 for BPP linear. Don't forget to check Auto Generate Bitmaps as well. And finally, there we have it. Our design is ready to be put back into DiRT Rally 2.0. In other words, we're moving on to our next chapter, importing and installing your design. Now this part is fairly quick and easy to do. Go to your adjusted design folder, then SR5 and keep opening them until you reach the 5 PSSG files. Then open the SR5 TextHigh00, which contains all the design files of the car's body, with the Ego PSSG editor tool. Remember in the beginning where we exported 4 files? Well, now we put the 4 design files we created with our own livery back in. Simply select the first one, which is the normal window file, go to Textures and then Import, select our corresponding design file and click on Open. Repeat the process for the other 3 design files and finally press Ctrl S and Replace. If you have made adjustments to the wheels as well, just use the same process of importing. The only thing left for us to do now is go back to our adjusted design folder, copy the whole SR5 folder, open cars in the games directory and paste it. When you load up a stage with your car, you will now be able to see and drive it. I already made a video in the past explaining the whole process of installing liveries in case you are unfamiliar with it, link in the description down below. However, I do expect that those who want to create their own designs already use custom liveries created by others like myself. So with everything said and done, we have reached the end of the tutorial. If you follow these steps, you will be able to create your own liveries for Dirt Rally 2.0. To round off the video, I will add a few extra tips, tricks and also a tool you might want to use. First off, let's talk about fine-tuning your work. Working on a 2D template with a wireframe and having so many different panels, it's not easy to have everything lined up properly. Honestly, it takes a lot of time checking, adjusting, checking again and so on and so on. But there are 3 ways of doing things that might help you and one tool which is vital. The tool I'm referring to is the camera mod, which is available for Dirt Rally 2.0. There is a download link in the description down below, so definitely check it out. This is a mod which enables a free moving camera during replays. Most players use it to take amazing screenshots or video footage of the cars, but for us as designers it can also be very handy in a completely different way. The first of 3 ways I mentioned is to create a DDS file of the template with the wireframe visible and install it into the game. Select a random stage and the car, preferably in custom championship. If you go via time trial, you'll have to drive the whole stage before you can watch the replay. In custom championship, you just have to drive a few meters, park the car, retire, and you can immediately check the replay. It's the way I'm doing it because it's a lot quicker, as you can probably imagine. Now, with the free movement of the cam tool, we can go around the car and take screenshots of the car panels. Thanks to the wireframe, we can now figure out how the different panels are lining up. Whilst designing, you can use those screenshots of the different panels to make sure that the lines of your design match up nicely. Right, that's one way of doing things. However, there is another approach you can take as well. Instead of taking images of the blank car with the wireframe before you start designing, you can also finish your design completely and install it with the wireframe visible. Once you have repeated the process of loading up the car onto the stage and eventually end up watching the replay, you can now use the cam tool to find places where the lines of your design don't really match up, take screenshots of it and use that to adjust the design in your work files. The final approach is also the best one, but it's only for people who know how it works, which doesn't include me unfortunately. I haven't been able and don't really have the time to properly figure it out. What I'm referring to is the method of designing directly on a 3D model in Photoshop. This will result in instantly correct designs which line up everywhere they need to. But as I said before, that's only for those who know how it works, which doesn't include me. I might be able to design some stunning car liveries, however there is still so much I can and should learn at some point. In regards to logos, there are a few tips and tricks I want to share with you as well. First of all, try to find logos which use the extension PNG and have a transparent background. This way you don't have to make any adjustments when adding them to your design. Secondly, try to find logos which are roughly the size you need them to be. It's fantastic to have a logo in PNG with transparent background, but if it's 4500 by 4500 like this one, you will have to scale it down considerably. This specific type of Michelin logo is usually placed somewhere on the front bumper or rear bumper. What will happen when you scale it down is that the logo will lose a lot of its sharpness, which will be noticeable in the game if you leave it like that. You could rework the logo completely and regain that sharpness, but why go through all this trouble when you can just find the same logo but roughly the right size to begin with. Thirdly, if you have access to Adobe Illustrator, it might be interesting to look for logos in vector. Because they are in vector, they will have clean lines instead of pixelated ones. Finding free vector versions for logos of smaller companies can be quite difficult, but the bigger brands are quite readily available online. If you have a vector logo which is too large, for example, you can scale it down in Illustrator to the right size without losing any of its sharpness. Export them as PNG and then use them on your design. The next tip is one I'm still struggling with myself. Make sure that your logos are always clearly visible on your design. In this example you can see that there's so much going on when it comes to the design pattern. I do admit it's a bit over the top, which resulted in certain logos being less prominently visible than they should be. On the latest Fabia I designed and used during this tutorial, you can clearly see the difference. It is still a somewhat complex design, yet there's a nice balance where the logos and pattern fit well together. Finding that balance might seem simple, but once you are working on a design, you quickly realize it's not. So with all of this said and done, I think it's time to wrap up this video. Whilst you can see some of my own custom designs I've created the past 2 years, I'd like to thank you all for watching. Hopefully this tutorial will help some of you improve your skills as a Dirt Rally 2.0 livery designer, or perhaps convince and guide you towards creating a very first design of your own. So if you found this video enjoyable or helpful in any way, feel free to give it a like. If you want to support the channel and stay updated on future content, consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell. It really helps the channel out. Once again, thank you very much for watching, enjoy the rest of your day, and goodbye.